The snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the marble steps of the Hartwell estate, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's car payments. Kana walked beside me, adjusting her designer coat for the third time, her heels clicking against the stone with practiced precision. The mansion loomed before us, all glass and granite, every window glowing with warm light that somehow felt cold. "Remember, Rhett," she said without looking at me. "Dinner starts at 6 sharp. Mother hates when people are late to the table." I checked my watch. We were 15 minutes early, as always. Kina's anxiety about impressing her parents never ceased to amaze me, considering she was 38 years old and ran a marketing firm that pulled in 7 figures annually. But here, in front of the Hartwell family estate, she transformed back into a nervous teenager seeking approval. "We're early," I replied, my breath forming small clouds in the December air, just like every other Christmas for the past 6 years. The front door opened before we could ring the bell. Lila appeared in the doorway, my 21-year-old stepdaughter, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile was bright and artificial, the kind she'd perfected for social media photos. "Mom! Rhett!" She hugged Kina first, then gave me a brief, obligatory embrace. "Everyone's already here. Adam arrived about an hour ago." My stomach tightened at the mention of Adam Price. Kina's college boyfriend, the one who got away, the golden boy who'd married into old money and spent his days playing golf at the country club, the man who somehow appeared at every major family gathering, despite having no actual connection to the family anymore, except through shared nostalgia and Kina's mother's inexplicable fondness for him. "Wonderful," I muttered, trailing them through the foyer with its absurd chandelier and oil portraits of long-gone Hartwells. The living room buzzed with conversation. Kina's parents, Richard and Margaret Hartwell, held court near the fireplace. Richard wore his usual expression of mild disapproval, as if the world consistently failed to meet his standards. Margaret clutched a martini glass and surveyed the room like a general inspecting troops. And there was Adam, standing near the piano, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile easy and confident. He wore a navy blazer that fit him like it was tailored yesterday, which it probably was. When he saw us enter, his face lit up with genuine warmth. "Kana." He moved across the room with athletic grace, arms extended. "You look absolutely stunning." They embraced longer than necessary. I watched Kina's face transform, years melting away as she laughed at something he whispered in her ear. For a moment, I felt like an intruder watching someone else's reunion. "Adam," I said, extending my hand. "Good to see you again." His handshake was firm, his smile polite but distant. "Rhett, how's the tech business treating you?" "Can't complain." I'd learned long ago not to elaborate on my work with this crowd. My company specialized in cybersecurity consulting, which sounded boring enough that people stopped asking follow-up questions. They had no idea that boring cybersecurity had bought me 3 houses and enough investments to retire tomorrow if I chose. "Rhett!" Margaret's voice cut through the room. "Come here, dear. I want to hear about your latest project." I dutifully made my rounds, accepting air kisses and making small talk about business ventures and holiday plans. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. These people had known each other for decades, their shared history creating an invisible barrier that I'd never quite managed to breach. Brooklyn and Trish, Kina's closest friends, dominated one corner of the room. Brooklyn was already 3 drinks in, her voice getting louder with each story about her latest social media controversy. Trish listened with the calculating expression of someone filing away information for later use. "Dinner is served," announced the housekeeper, a woman who'd worked for the Hartwells longer than I'd been alive. We moved toward the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a mahogany table that could seat 20. Crystal glasses caught the light from an overhead fixture that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. The table was set with the Hartwell family china, each place setting arranged with military precision. I'd sat in the same seat for 6 years running. Third chair on the right, between Kina and her cousin David, who usually spent dinner talking about his law practice in excruciating detail. It wasn't the head of the table, but it was respectable, acknowledging my position as Kina's husband while maintaining the family hierarchy. As I approached my usual spot, Kina's hand landed on my shoulder. "Move," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "This seat is for Adam." The conversation stopped. Every eye in the room turned toward us. I felt heat creep up my neck as I processed what had just happened. Kina stood behind my chair, her hand still on my shoulder, waiting for me to step aside. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "Adam should sit here," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You can take the seat at the end." She gestured toward the far end of the table, where an extra chair had been placed. It was clearly an afterthought, squeezed in between the wall and Uncle Harold, who had a habit of spitting when he talked about politics. Lila giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Come on, Rhett, don't make this weird." Adam looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. "Kina, I'm fine, sitting anywhere." "Nonsense," Margaret interjected, her martini glass empty but her voice sharp. "Adam is practically family. Rhett won't mind." I looked around the table at faces I'd shared Christmas dinner with for 6 years. Richard avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by his napkin. David examined his wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. Brooklyn smirked openly while Trish watched with the intensity of someone witnessing a car accident. "Actually," I said, "I do mind." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Margaret's face flushed red above her pearl necklace. "I beg your pardon?" "I mind," I repeated, looking directly at Kina. "I'm your daughter's husband. I've sat in this chair for 6 years. Why exactly should I give it up for your ex-boyfriend?" Kina's face went white, then red. "Rhett, please don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm asking a reasonable question." Richard stood up, his considerable height and bulk filling the space. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "If you don't like the seating arrangements," he said, "you're welcome to leave." The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked around the table one more time, taking in their faces. Kina wouldn't meet my eyes. Lila was filming with her phone, probably already composing the social media post about family drama. Adam looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "You know what?" I said, reaching for my coat. "I think I will." I walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind me, I heard Margaret's voice, shrill with indignation. "Well, I never! The absolute nerve!" Kina called my name once, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking through the foyer, past the ridiculous chandelier and the portraits of people who'd been judging visitors from their frames for a century. The cold air hit my face like a slap as I stepped outside. My hands shook as I fumbled for my car keys, whether from anger or adrenaline, I couldn't tell. I sat in my car for a moment, engine running, watching the warm light spill from the dining room windows. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my password manager. The beauty of modern technology is how interconnected everything has become. Shared accounts, linked profiles, authorized users, emergency contacts. Over 6 years of marriage, Kina had gradually gained access to various aspects of my digital life. Not everything, mind you. I wasn't completely naive, but enough to make her comfortable, to make her feel secure in our partnership. I started with the obvious ones: bank accounts, credit cards, investment portfolios. Her authorized user status disappeared with a few taps. The shared checking account became mine alone. The credit cards that carried her name were canceled. Next came the property access. Our house used a smart lock system that I'd installed myself. Kina's phone, Lila's phone, even Margaret's phone for emergencies, all removed from the authorized list. The security system no longer recognized their faces or voices. The cars were next. Both vehicles were registered in my name, but I'd added Kina as an authorized driver for insurance purposes. Not anymore. Her access to the Tesla and the Range Rover vanished into the digital ether. I opened my email and typed a short message to our estate attorney. Please suspend all household privileges per Schedule C of our prenuptial agreement, effective immediately. Full revocation of access pending further instruction. Schedule C was something Kina had probably forgotten about, buried in the legal documents she'd signed without reading carefully. It gave me the right to suspend shared privileges in case of material breach of trust or respect. Her lawyer had probably thought it was harmless boilerplate. Travel came next. Private jet access, hotel reservations, the vacation rental in Aspen that was booked for New Year's Eve. All transferred to my name only or canceled outright. I updated emergency contacts at Lila's University, removing myself as an authorized party for academic and financial matters. The tuition payments would continue, but they'd need to find someone else to call when she got arrested for underage drinking. My phone buzzed with the first notification. Kina's credit card had been declined at some restaurant. It was starting. I put the car in drive and headed home, leaving the Hartwell estate in my rearview mirror. The snow was falling harder now, covering the world in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. By the time I reached our house, my phone was buzzing constantly. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. I ignored them all and pulled into the garage, watching the door close behind me with a sense of finality. The house felt different somehow, quieter. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my study, watching the notifications pile up on my phone screen. 35 missed calls and counting. I archived them all and opened my laptop to book a flight. Somewhere warm, where Christmas was just another day and ex-boyfriends didn't steal seats at dinner tables. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my study as I reviewed the overnight notifications on my phone. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, and 12 voicemails, the digital equivalent of someone pounding on my door and screaming my name. I deleted them all without reading or listening to a single one. My laptop chimed with an email from our estate attorney, confirming that all shared privileges had been suspended per my request. Another notification showed that Kina had tried to access our joint investment account at 6:47 a.m. Access denied. I made coffee and settled back at my desk, opening the security system interface for our house. The logs showed multiple attempts to open the front door using Kina's phone, starting at 11:30 p.m. the previous night and continuing until 3:15 a.m. Each attempt was logged and denied. The cameras showed her standing on our front porch in her red Christmas dress, pressing her phone against the lock reader with increasing desperation. The footage was almost comical. After the phone failed, she'd tried the backup keypad, apparently forgetting that I'd changed the code months ago after she'd given it to her personal trainer. Then she'd attempted to use the garage door opener in her car, which no longer recognized her vehicle's signal. At one point, she'd walked around the house, testing windows and the back door like some kind of well-dressed burglar. The motion sensors tracked her progress, illuminating her path with security lights that made her look like she was performing some bizarre midnight theater. Around 2 a.m., a car had pulled into our driveway. Adam's silver BMW. He'd gotten out and joined Kina on the front porch, gesturing at the door and apparently offering suggestions. They'd stood there for 20 minutes, two middle-aged people locked out of a house like teenagers who'd missed curfew. I saved the footage to my secure server. Evidence was always useful. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message back. "Rhett, it's me." Kina's voice was strained, exhausted. "I'm using Brooklyn's phone. Please call me back. We need to talk about this. What you're doing is... It's insane. I can't get into the house. I can't access any of our accounts. My cards aren't working. Please just call me back so we can work this out like adults." I deleted the voicemail and blocked Brooklyn's number. The beauty of my profession was that I understood systems, not just computer systems, but the interconnected web of modern life. Everything was digital now, from door locks to bank accounts to car keys. When you controlled the digital infrastructure, you controlled everything that mattered. I'd spent 6 years gradually building that infrastructure around our life together. Kina had been happy to let me handle the technical details while she focused on her career and social obligations. She'd signed the documents, agreed to the account structures, and handed over access credentials without a second thought, now that trust was working against her. My laptop chimed with another notification. Someone had tried to log into my email account from an unfamiliar device. The attempt was blocked by two-factor authentication, but the location data showed it had originated from the Hartwell estate, probably Lila trying to be clever with her computer science classes. I enabled additional security protocols and changed several passwords just to be safe. Then I opened a new browser window and began researching flights to somewhere warm and far away. The doorbell rang. I ignored it. The doorbell rang again, followed by aggressive knocking. Through the security cameras, I could see Kina standing on the front porch, still wearing yesterday's dress, but now wrinkled and disheveled. Her makeup was smeared, her hair a mess. She looked like she'd slept in her car. Behind her stood Lila and Brooklyn, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Brooklyn held her phone up, probably recording everything for her social media followers. "Rhett!" Kina shouted at the door. "I know you're in there. Open this door right now." I turned up the volume on my music and continued browsing flight options. Costa Rica looked appealing. No extradition treaties for civil matters, excellent internet infrastructure for remote work, and beautiful beaches where ex-wives couldn't find you. The knocking intensified. Through the intercom system, I could hear Kina's voice getting more desperate. "This is ridiculous. This is my house too. You can't just lock me out." Actually, I could. The house was in my name alone, purchased before our marriage, with money from the sale of my first company. The prenuptial agreement was very clear about separate property rights. Kina had signed it without objection, probably assuming she'd never need to worry about such details. My phone rang. This time it was Trish's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back. "Rhett, this is Trish. What you're doing to Kina is completely unacceptable. She's sitting in my car crying because she can't get into her own home. Whatever happened at dinner last night, this is not the way to handle it. Call me back so we can discuss this like reasonable people." I blocked Trish's number and added it to the growing list of people I never needed to hear from again. The knocking had stopped. Through the cameras, I watched Kina pace back and forth on the porch, talking animatedly on Brooklyn's phone. Lila sat on the front steps, scrolling through her own phone with the bored expression of someone forced to participate in adult drama. After about 10 minutes, they gave up and walked back to Brooklyn's car. I watched them drive away, then returned to my flight research. My email chimed with a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From Kina, please read." I almost deleted it automatically, but curiosity got the better of me. "Rhett, I had to create a new email account because you apparently blocked my regular one. I don't understand what's happening or why you're acting this way. Yes, the seating thing at dinner was handled poorly, but this reaction is completely out of proportion. I've been locked out of my own home for 12 hours. I can't access our bank accounts, my credit cards don't work, and you won't answer your phone. This is not how married people solve problems. Please call me so we can talk about this rationally. I'm staying at Brooklyn's tonight, but I expect to be able to come home tomorrow. Kina." I forwarded the email to our estate attorney with a note. "Please document this admission of the seating incident for our records." Then I blocked the new email address and bought a first-class ticket to San Jose, Costa Rica, departing that evening. The afternoon passed quietly. I packed a single bag with enough clothes for a week, along with my laptop and essential electronics. The beauty of remote work was that I could run my business from anywhere with a decent internet connection. Around 4 p.m., my doorbell rang again. This time, it was a man I didn't recognize, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. Through the intercom, he identified himself as Thomas Mitchell, attorney at law, representing Kina Vossen in a domestic matter. I didn't answer the door, but I did record his visit for future reference. He left a business card wedged in the doorframe and a legal-looking envelope in my mailbox. The envelope contained a cease and desist letter demanding that I immediately restore Kina's access to all shared accounts and property. It threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 24 hours. I scanned the document and emailed it to my own attorney with a note. Please review and respond appropriately. I'll be out of the country for the next week. As the sun set, I loaded my bag into the car and headed for the airport. My phone had stopped buzzing with calls and messages. Either they'd given up, or they'd realized I wasn't going to respond. The drive to the airport was peaceful. Christmas lights twinkled in windows, families gathered around dinner tables, couples walked hand in hand through the snow. It all looked warm and inviting from the outside, like a Christmas card come to life. But I'd learned something important at that dinner table. Sometimes the warmest-looking places were the coldest inside. Sometimes the people who claimed to love you were the first ones to push you aside when someone more appealing came along. I parked in long-term parking and walked into the terminal, my single bag slung over my shoulder. The departure board showed flights to dozens of destinations, each one representing a chance to start over somewhere new. My phone buzzed one last time as I approached the security checkpoint. Another unknown number, another voicemail I'd never listened to. I powered off the phone and dropped it into my carry-on bag. Whatever Kina and her family wanted to say to me, they could say it to my attorney. The security line moved quickly, and soon I was walking toward my gate, leaving behind the snow and the Christmas lights and the family that had never really been mine to begin with. Costa Rica was going to be beautiful this time of year. The Hotel Presidente in San Jose had excellent Wi-Fi and a bar that never seemed to close. I'd been there for 3 days, working during the morning hours and spending my afternoons exploring the city. The weather was perfect, the coffee was outstanding, and most importantly, my phone stayed blissfully silent. I'd powered it back on once, just long enough to see that I had over 200 missed notifications. I'd turned it off again without reading any of them, but curiosity eventually got the better of me. On Thursday morning, sitting in the hotel's business center with a cup of Costa Rican coffee that put Starbucks to shame, I decided to check my security system back home. What I found was better than any soap opera. The cameras had captured everything. Kina's repeated attempts to get into the house, her conversations with various friends and family members on the front porch, and most interestingly, her meetings with Adam Price. He'd been there every day since I left. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Kina, once with what appeared to be a locksmith who'd taken one look at my security system and shaken his head before driving away. But it was the footage from Tuesday night that really caught my attention. Around 11 p.m., Adam's BMW had pulled into my driveway. He'd gotten out with what looked like a bottle of wine and walked to the front door where Kina was waiting. They'd embraced, and not in the casual way of old friends offering comfort. This was the embrace of lovers. I watched as they kissed on my front porch, their bodies pressed together with an urgency that spoke of long-suppressed desire finally being released. Adam's hands tangled in Kina's hair while she pulled him closer, their mouths moving together like they were trying to devour each other. When they finally broke apart, Kina had led him around to the back of the house, out of view of the front cameras. But my security system was thorough. The backyard cameras picked up the story, showing them settling onto the patio furniture I'd assembled myself last spring. The wine bottle opened, glasses appeared, and they talked for hours. The audio pickup was excellent, and their voices carried clearly in the cold night air. "I can't believe he just left like that," Kina was saying, her voice slightly slurred from the wine. "Who does that? Who just walks out on Christmas dinner?" Someone who's finally showing his true colors, Adam replied. I never understood what you saw in him, honestly. He's always been so cold, calculating. I nearly laughed out loud at that. Adam Price, trust fund baby and professional socialite, calling me calculating. He wasn't always like this, Keena said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. When we first met, he seemed different. More, I don't know, more human. You were rebounding from us, Adam said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You were hurt and vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. The revisionist history was fascinating to watch. In reality, Keena had pursued me relentlessly after we met at a charity auction. I'd been the reluctant one, still recovering from my own divorce, and focused on building my business. She'd been the one pushing for commitment, for marriage, for the big house and the joint accounts. I should have fought harder for you back then, Adam continued. I should have never let my parents talk me into that engagement with Patricia, biggest mistake of my life. We were so young, Keena said, but she didn't pull her hand away. Maybe it wasn't the right time then. And now? The question hung in the air between them. I leaned closer to my laptop screen, fascinated by this performance playing out on my back patio. Now I'm married, Keena said, but her voice lacked conviction. To a man who just abandoned you over a seating arrangement, Adam pointed out. To someone who's so petty he's locked you out of your own home. It's not my home, Keena admitted quietly. It's his. Everything is his. I signed that stupid prenup without really reading it, and now... She trailed off, but Adam picked up the thread. Now you're trapped, he said. Dependent on someone who clearly doesn't respect you or value what you bring to the relationship. I had to admire his technique. Classic manipulation, isolating the target from their support system while positioning himself as the only viable alternative. I bring plenty to this relationship, Keena said, but she sounded defensive. Of course you do. You're brilliant, successful, beautiful. You could have anyone you wanted. Could I? Keena looked directly at him. Could I have you? Adam moved his chair closer to hers. You never stopped having me, Keena, not really. What we had, that doesn't just disappear because of a piece of paper. They kissed again, longer this time, with more passion. When they separated, Keena was breathing hard. This is crazy, she whispered. This is right, Adam corrected. This is what should have happened years ago. I fast-forwarded through the next hour, watching them talk and kiss and gradually move closer together on the patio furniture. Around 2 a.m., they'd gone inside Adam's car, presumably for privacy and warmth. The car had rocked gently for about 30 minutes. When they emerged, Keena's hair was disheveled and Adam's shirt was untucked. They'd kissed goodbye like teenagers after prom, whispering promises to see each other the next day. I sat back in my chair, processing what I'd just witnessed. The timeline was becoming clear. This wasn't a sudden rebound triggered by our dinner table confrontation. This had been building for a while, probably months. I opened a new browser window and began researching. Adam's social media showed him at several events where Keena had also been present, going back to early fall. Her Instagram had photos from a charity gala in October where they were standing suspiciously close together. Another shot from a corporate networking event in November showed them sharing what looked like an intimate conversation in the background. I cross-referenced their locations using the metadata from their photos. They'd been at the same restaurant on 3 different occasions in the past 2 months, always on nights when Keena had told me she was having dinner with Brooklyn or working late. The evidence painted a clear picture. The Christmas dinner incident hadn't caused their affair. It had simply provided them with an excuse to stop hiding it. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from my attorney. I answered it for the first time in 4 days. Rhett, thank God, came David Chen's voice. I've been trying to reach you for days. We need to talk. I'm listening. First, where are you? Kena's attorney is claiming you've abandoned the marital home and are in violation of your prenuptial agreement. I'm in Costa Rica on business, I lied smoothly. And I haven't abandoned anything. I'm simply exercising my rights under Schedule C of the prenup. About that, David said. Mitchell is challenging the validity of that clause. He's claiming it's unconscionable and unenforceable. Let him challenge it. We have 6 years of precedent showing that Keena accepted the terms without objection. Besides, I have evidence that she's been violating the fidelity clause. There was a pause. What kind of evidence? The kind that makes Mitchell's threats irrelevant, I said. I'll send you the relevant files when I get back to my hotel room. Rhett, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you planning to file for divorce? I looked out the window at the Costa Rican sunshine, thinking about Keena and Adam on my back patio, rewriting history to justify their betrayal. I'm planning to protect my interests, I said, whatever that requires. Okay. In that case, I need you to be very careful about your actions going forward. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Don't contact Keena directly. Don't go to her workplace. Don't engage with her friends or family. I haven't contacted anyone, I pointed out. I've been completely silent since Christmas night. Good. Keep it that way. Let me handle all communication through official channels. After I hung up, I spent the rest of the morning compiling video evidence and documentation of Keena's affair. The security footage was damning, but I also had credit card records showing charges at restaurants and hotels that didn't match her claimed whereabouts. Phone records revealed hundreds of calls and texts between her and Adam over the past 3 months. By the time I finished, I had a comprehensive dossier that would make any divorce attorney salivate. Adultery, deception, violation of the prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause. It was enough to ensure that Keena walked away from our marriage with exactly what she'd brought into it. Nothing. I emailed everything to David with a note. Use as needed. Then I closed my laptop and walked down to the hotel bar. It was 5 o'clock somewhere, and I had some celebrating to do. The bartender was a friendly local named Carlos, who made excellent mojitos and spoke perfect English. As he muddled mint for my drink, I found myself thinking about the past 6 years. Had there been signs? Looking back, probably. Kenna's increasing dissatisfaction with our social life, her complaints that we didn't fit in with her friends, her growing distance in our personal relationship. I'd attributed it to work stress and the normal evolution of a marriage. But maybe I'd been willfully blind. Maybe I'd been so focused on building my business and providing the lifestyle she wanted that I'd missed the fact that she'd already started looking elsewhere for what she really needed. You look like a man with something on his mind, Carlos observed, setting the mojito in front of me. Just thinking about the past, I said, and the future. The past is gone, Carlos said with the philosophical certainty of someone who'd probably seen his share of heartbroken tourists. The future is what you make it. I raised my glass in a toast, to making it count. The mojito was perfect, and the Costa Rican sunset was spectacular. For the first time in days, I felt genuinely relaxed. Tomorrow I would fly home and deal with whatever legal challenges Keena and her attorney wanted to throw at me. But tonight, I was going to enjoy being a free man in paradise, with evidence that would ensure I stayed that way. The flight back to the States gave me plenty of time to plan my next moves. I'd been gone for a week, long enough for Keena and Adam to get comfortable in their new reality, long enough for them to make mistakes. I landed at O'Hare on a gray Tuesday morning, collected my car from long-term parking, and drove home through streets still decorated with Christmas lights that now looked tired and forgotten. The holidays were over, and real life was reasserting itself with typical Midwestern brutality. My house looked exactly as I'd left it, pristine and secure. The security logs showed that Keena had stopped trying to get in after the 4th day, but Adam's car had been in my driveway as recently as yesterday afternoon. I unpacked quickly and settled into my study to review a week's worth of accumulated evidence. The cameras had captured everything, creating a detailed record of my wife's affair playing out on my own property. But it was the audio from their most recent conversation that really caught my attention. They'd been sitting in Adam's car in my driveway, apparently feeling bold enough to conduct their planning session right outside my front door. "He can't stay in Costa Rica forever," Kana was saying. "Eventually he'll have to come back and deal with this." "When he does, you need to be ready," Adam replied. "Mitchell thinks we can challenge the prenup if we can prove emotional abandonment." Is that what this is? Emotional abandonment? A man who locks his wife out of her home over a dinner seating arrangement? Any judge would see that as unreasonable. I had to admire their strategy. Paint me as the unstable aggressor while positioning Kina as the victim of an abusive relationship. It might have worked if I didn't have video evidence of them planning the whole thing. "What about the money?" Kina asked. "I can't access anything. My cards don't work, the bank won't talk to me, even my gym membership got canceled." "That's all going to work in our favor," Adam assured her. "Financial abuse is a real thing, and judges don't like it when wealthy spouses use money as a weapon." "But what do I do in the meantime? I can't keep staying at Brooklyn's forever." "You could stay with me," Adam suggested, his voice taking on a different tone. "My place has plenty of room." There was a pause, then the sound of movement in the car. When Kina spoke again, her voice was breathless. "We're really doing this, aren't we? After all these years." "We should have done it a long time ago," Adam murmured. "I was an idiot to let you go." The audio devolved into sounds that I didn't need to hear. I fast-forwarded until they were talking again. "I should probably get some of my things from the house," Kina was saying. "My clothes, my jewelry, personal items. Can you get in?" "No, but I know where he keeps the spare key for the cleaning service. He probably forgot about it." Actually, I hadn't forgotten. I'd been wondering when she'd remember it herself. "When do you want to do it?" Adam asked. "Tomorrow afternoon. He never comes home before 6 on weekdays." I checked the timestamp on the recording. This conversation had taken place yesterday evening, which meant they were planning to break into my house this afternoon. Perfect. I spent the morning making preparations. First, I called my office and cleared my calendar for the day. Then I contacted my attorney and asked him to have a process server standing by. Finally, I reviewed my home security system and made a few adjustments to ensure optimal camera angles and audio quality. At 1:30 p.m., I parked my car 2 blocks away and walked back to my house through the neighbor's backyard. The spare key was hidden in a fake rock near the service entrance, exactly where it had always been. I let myself in quietly and made my way to my study, where I could monitor the security cameras without being seen. Then I settled in to wait. At 2:15, Adam's BMW pulled into my driveway. Kina got out of the passenger seat, looking nervous but determined. She was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman I'd first met 7 years ago. They approached the front door first, probably hoping I'd changed my mind about the locks. When that failed, they walked around to the side of the house where the spare key was hidden. "There," Kina said, pointing to the fake rock. "He thinks he's so clever with his security system, but he never changed the cleaning service protocols." Adam retrieved the key and handed it to her. "You sure he's not home?" "His car's not here, and he always parks in the garage when he's home. Besides, he never takes time off work. He's probably in his office obsessing over some new client." They let themselves in through the service entrance, triggering multiple motion sensors and camera feeds. I watched them move through my house like burglars, whispering to each other and jumping at every small sound. "God, this place is like a museum," Adam muttered as they passed through the living room. "No wonder you were miserable here." "It wasn't always like this," Kina said, but she didn't sound convinced. "He used to be different." They made their way upstairs to the master bedroom, where Kina began pulling clothes from the walk-in closet. Adam wandered around the room, picking up personal items and examining them with obvious disdain. "Jesus, look at this," he said, holding up a framed photo from our wedding. "You look terrified." I was nervous, Kina replied, not looking at the picture. It was a big day. You look like you're going to your execution. Kina stopped packing and stared at him. That's a horrible thing to say. I'm sorry, but it's true. Look at your face in this picture, Kina. Really look at it. You're not happy. You're scared. She took the photo from him and studied it for a long moment. In the security feed, I could see her expression change as she processed whatever she was seeing. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe I was scared. Maybe some part of me knew this wasn't right. Your instincts were trying to protect you, Adam said, moving closer to her. But you ignored them because you thought you should be grateful that someone like him wanted you. Someone like him? Rich, successful, stable. All the things your parents taught you to value in a husband. But what about love, Kina? What about passion? What about being with someone who actually sees you for who you are? It was a masterful performance. Adam had clearly studied the art of emotional manipulation, knowing exactly which buttons to push to make Kina question everything about her marriage. I did love him, Kina said, but her voice lacked conviction. At least, I thought I did. You loved the security he represented, Adam corrected. You loved the idea of being taken care of. But that's not the same thing as loving the person. They kissed again, right there in my bedroom, surrounded by the furniture I'd chosen and the art we'd bought together. The symbolism was almost too perfect. When they broke apart, Kina resumed packing with renewed energy, as if Adam's words had freed her from some invisible constraint. I want the jewelry too, she said, especially the pieces that were my grandmother's. Where does he keep it? There's a safe in his study. I know the combination. Of course she did. I'd given it to her years ago, back when I still trusted her completely. They made their way downstairs to my study, passing within 10 feet of where I sat hidden behind a bookshelf. Kina went straight to the wall safe and entered the combination with practiced ease. Wow, Adam said, as the safe opened to reveal my document storage and Kina's jewelry collection. He really doesn't trust banks, does he? He likes to keep important things where he can see them, Kina said, pulling out several jewelry boxes. Control freak. She was taking everything. The diamond earrings I'd bought for our first anniversary, the pearl necklace from her birthday last year, even the antique brooch that had belonged to my grandmother, not hers. What about these? Adam asked, pointing to the document folders. Legal papers, probably. Contracts, business stuff, nothing interesting. If she'd looked closer, she would have seen the folder labeled Kina Personal that contained copies of all the evidence I'd gathered during my week in Costa Rica. But she was too focused on the jewelry to notice. They finished their pilfering and headed back toward the service entrance. As they reached the door, Adam stopped and turned back toward the house. You know what? This feels too easy. Are you sure he doesn't know we're here? Kina laughed, but it sounded forced. You're being paranoid. Rhett's not that smart. If he was, he would have figured out what was happening months ago. Maybe, or maybe he's been letting us think we're getting away with it. That would require him to actually pay attention to me, Kina said bitterly. Trust me, he's completely clueless. They left through the service entrance, loading Kina's stolen goods into Adam's car. As they drove away, I emerged from my hiding spot and reviewed the security footage to make sure I'd captured everything clearly. The video quality was perfect. Every word, every gesture, every incriminating detail was recorded in high definition. They'd just handed me everything I needed to destroy them both in court. I called my attorney and arranged to have the footage delivered to him within the hour. Then I called the police to report a burglary, providing them with clear video evidence of 2 individuals unlawfully entering my home and stealing personal property. By evening, arrest warrants had been issued for both Kina and Adam. The charges were relatively minor: breaking and entering, theft under $10,000. But they were enough to establish a legal record of their criminal behavior. I didn't press for immediate arrest. Instead, I had my attorney inform their lawyers that the charges would be dropped in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce settlement that adhered strictly to the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Kina could have her freedom and her affair partner, but she wouldn't get a penny of my money, and she'd have to live with the knowledge that her betrayal had been captured in excruciating detail for posterity. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. The next few days passed in a blur of legal maneuvering and strategic positioning. Kina's attorney, Mitchell, had clearly been caught off guard by the burglary evidence. His aggressive threats about challenging the prenup had evaporated overnight, replaced by desperate attempts to negotiate some kind of face-saving settlement. I sat in David Chen's office on Friday afternoon, reviewing the latest proposal from Mitchell's team. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city spread out below us, gray and cold, under a January sky that promised more snow. "They're offering to drop all challenges to the prenup in exchange for you dropping the criminal charges," David said, sliding the document across his mahogany desk. "Plus, they want a confidentiality agreement preventing you from discussing the circumstances of the divorce." I laughed, a sound without humor. "They want me to pay for the privilege of keeping their crimes secret?" "That's essentially what they're proposing, yes. Mitchell knows the burglary charges make any challenge to the prenup impossible. A spouse can't claim financial hardship while simultaneously stealing jewelry worth $50,000. "What's the timeline if we proceed with the divorce as written?" 6 weeks, maybe 8. The prenup is ironclad, and the adultery evidence makes it even stronger. Kina walks away with what she brought into the marriage, which according to our records was approximately $12,000 in personal assets and a car loan. I studied the settlement offer, thinking about Kina and Adam planning their future together in my driveway, confident that they could manipulate the legal system to their advantage. "Counteroffer," I said. "I'll drop the criminal charges and agree to the confidentiality clause. But I want something in return." "What did you have in mind?" "I want a public apology. From both of them. At the country club, in front of everyone who was at that Christmas dinner. I want them to admit that their behavior was inappropriate and that the breakdown of the marriage was entirely due to their affair." David raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual. Most people in your position would prefer to handle this quietly." "Most people weren't humiliated at their in-laws' Christmas dinner and then robbed by their cheating wife," I pointed out. "Besides, you said they want confidentiality. This gives them a choice: public accountability or criminal prosecution." "I'll present the offer," David said, making notes on his legal pad, "though I suspect they'll reject it. Then we go to trial, and everything becomes public record anyway. At least this way they have some control over the narrative." I left David's office feeling more optimistic than I had in weeks. The legal machinery was grinding in my favor, and Kina's options were narrowing with each passing day. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. K." I ignored it and drove home, where I spent the evening reviewing business proposals and trying to pretend that my personal life wasn't imploding in spectacular fashion. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was working in my study when the doorbell rang, followed by aggressive knocking that I'd learned to associate with my soon-to-be ex-wife. The security cameras showed Kina standing alone on my front porch, looking haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight in the past 2 weeks, and her usually perfect appearance was showing cracks. Her hair needed attention, her clothes looked slept in, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who wasn't sleeping well. I activated the intercom system without opening the door. "What do you want, Kina?" "I want to talk," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Please, Rhett, just give me 5 minutes." "Talk to my lawyer." "I can't afford my lawyer anymore," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Mitchell wants a $50,000 retainer to continue, and I don't have it. My credit cards are canceled, I can't access our accounts, and my salary doesn't cover both legal fees and living expenses." You should have thought about that before you decided to redecorate my house with your boyfriend. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. I have video evidence of exactly what I think, Keena. High-definition video with excellent audio quality. Would you like me to play it back for you? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. I made mistakes, she said. I know that. But this punishment, it's too much, Rhett. You're destroying my entire life over one moment of poor judgment. One moment? I leaned closer to the intercom. I have evidence of a 3-month affair, Keena. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, phone records, text messages. You've been lying to me since October, maybe longer. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Adam and I, we were just friends catching up. It was innocent at first, just coffee and conversation. But then you decided to upgrade to hotel rooms and my back patio. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You don't understand what it's been like, living in this house, being married to someone who treats me like a business associate instead of a wife. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. I tried to talk to you, but you were always working, always focused on your next deal or your next client. When was the last time we had a real conversation, Rhett? When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling or what I needed? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since Christmas night. Had I been neglecting our relationship? Probably. But that didn't justify what she'd done. You're right, I said, surprising her. I wasn't the perfect husband. I was focused on work, maybe too focused. But you know what the difference is between us, Keena. When I was unhappy, I didn't go behind your back and betray everything we'd built together. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. The thing with Adam, it was supposed to be temporary. A way to feel valued again, to remember what it was like to be desired. And the Christmas dinner? Was that temporary too? She was quiet for a long time. That was Adam's idea. He said it would force the issue, make you realize that you were losing me. Congratulations, it worked. Rhett, please, I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. I'll end things with Adam completely. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her through the camera, this woman I'd been married to for 6 years, and felt nothing but sadness. Not anger anymore, not betrayal, just a deep weariness at the waste of it all. It's too late for that, I said. You made your choice at that dinner table. You chose him over me, in front of your entire family. You humiliated me in the most public way possible, and then you compounded it by stealing from me. I was taking my own things. Including my grandmother's brooch? That was yours too? She had no answer for that. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to accept the divorce terms as written in the prenup. You're going to return everything you stole from my house, and you're going to do it quietly, without any more drama or manipulation attempts. And if I don't? Then you and Adam can explain to a jury why you thought it was appropriate to burglarize your husband's home to steal jewelry for your affair partner. I'm sure that will go over well with the local media. She stared at the camera for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions. Anger, desperation, resignation. I loved you, she said finally. Maybe not the way you needed me to, but I did love you. I know, I said, and meant it. But love isn't enough when there's no respect. And you lost respect for me a long time ago. She turned and walked away without another word. I watched her get into Brooklyn's car, which was waiting at the curb, and drive away. An hour later, my phone rang. David Chen's voice was excited. They accepted your counteroffer, he said. Full terms. Public apology at the country club, return of all stolen property, and adherence to the prenup. Mitchell practically begged me to draw up the paperwork. When? Tomorrow night. The country club has a regular Sunday dinner service. Mitchell suggested 7 p.m. when the dining room is typically full. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Perfect. Make sure someone records it for posterity. Already arranged. This is going to be quite a show. Indeed it was. After 6 years of marriage and 2 weeks of legal warfare, Kina and Adam were about to learn that actions have consequences, even in the rarefied air of country club society. Especially there. The Riverside Country Club on a Sunday evening in January was exactly what you'd expect from a place that had catered to the city's elite for more than a century. Crystal chandeliers bathed white tablecloths in warm light, while oil portraits of long-departed members looked on from gilded frames. The dining room hummed with the low conversation of people who had never worried about money and never imagined they would. I arrived at 6:45 p.m. dressed in my best suit and carrying a sense of anticipation that felt almost festive. David Chen met me at the entrance, looking like a man who was about to witness something memorable. "They're already here," he said, nodding toward a corner table where Kina and Adam sat with Mitchell, their attorney. "Been here for 20 minutes, looking like they're about to attend their own funeral." "How do they want to handle this?" Mitchell suggested they make a brief statement during the dessert course, when most people are lingering over coffee, maximum audience, minimal disruption to the dinner service. I nodded, surveying the dining room. Most of the tables were occupied, and I recognized several faces from the Christmas dinner that had started this whole mess. Richard and Margaret Hartwell sat at their usual table near the windows. Brooklyn and Trish occupied a small table near the bar, probably hoping to get good video footage for social media. "Ladies and gentlemen," the club manager announced, tapping his wine glass with a knife, "we have a brief announcement this evening." The conversation died as all eyes turned toward Kina and Adam's table. Mitchell stood first, clearing his throat nervously. "Thank you for your attention," he began. "My clients have asked me to facilitate a personal statement regarding recent events that some of you may have heard about." Kina stood slowly, her face pale but composed. She'd dressed carefully for this moment, wearing a simple black dress that made her look like she was in mourning, which, in a way, she was. "Many of you know me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been a member of this community for most of my adult life. You've celebrated with me, supported my business ventures, and welcomed me into your homes." She paused, looking around the room at faces that had once been friendly, but now watched her with the cold curiosity of people observing a traffic accident. "I stand before you tonight to acknowledge that I have failed to live up to the standards of behavior that this community expects and deserves," she continued, her voice getting stronger. "I have betrayed the trust of my husband, violated the sanctity of my marriage, and brought dishonor to my family name." A murmur ran through the room. This was more than anyone had expected. Adam stood beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the hunched posture of a man who knew he was about to be publicly shamed. "I want to be clear," Kina said, looking directly at me for the first time. "The breakdown of my marriage was entirely due to my own choices and actions. My husband did nothing to deserve the treatment he received, either from me or from my family." Margaret Hartwell's face went white. Several people turned to look at her, remembering the Christmas dinner incident that had apparently triggered this whole mess. "Adam and I began an inappropriate relationship several months ago," Kina continued. "We conducted this affair in secret, lying to our friends and family while betraying the trust of someone who had shown me nothing but generosity and respect." Adam cleared his throat. "I want to add," he said, his voice hoarse, "that I pursued this relationship knowing full well that Kina was married. I allowed my feelings to override my judgment and my moral obligations. I take full responsibility for my role in destroying a marriage and hurting an innocent person." The room was silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in place, as they witnessed this unprecedented display of public contrition. "We have both learned," Kina said, "that actions have consequences, and that the people we hurt deserve better than excuses or justifications. We offer this apology not because we expect forgiveness, but because accountability is the first step toward becoming better people. She sat down abruptly, as if her legs could no longer support her. Adam remained standing for a moment longer, then sank into his chair beside her. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then, slowly, conversation resumed as people processed what they'd just witnessed. I stood and walked over to their table. Mitchell tensed, probably expecting some kind of confrontation, but I simply extended my hand to Keena. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That took courage." She looked up at me with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. It was the least I could do. I shook Adam's hand as well, noting that his palm was damp with perspiration. "I hope you'll both be happy together," I said, and meant it. As I walked away, I heard Keena whisper, "We're not together anymore." I turned back, surprised. "What?" "Adam and I," she said, not meeting his eyes. "We ended things yesterday. It turns out that relationships built on betrayal don't have very solid foundations." Adam's face flushed red, but he didn't contradict her. I got the impression that the decision hadn't been mutual. "I see," I said. "Well, I hope you both find what you're looking for." I returned to my table, where David was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "That was better than I expected," he said. "Full admission of guilt, public accountability, and apparently they've already broken up. Your divorce just became the easiest case I've ever handled." Over the next hour, several people approached my table to offer their condolences and support. It was clear that public opinion had shifted decisively in my favor. Keena and Adam had effectively destroyed their own reputations while rehabilitating mine. Richard Hartwell was the last to approach, looking older than his 72 years. "Rhett," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology. What happened at Christmas dinner was inexcusable, and I should have intervened." "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Margaret and I would like to invite you to dinner next week if you're willing. We'd like to make amends." I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to reject it, to make them live with the consequences of their choices, just as Keena and Adam were doing. But holding on to anger was exhausting, and I was tired of being angry. "I'd like that," I said. "But maybe we could skip the formal dining room this time." He actually smiled at that. "The kitchen table it is." As the evening wound down, I watched Keena and Adam leave separately. Their brief alliance dissolved, along with their relationship. Keena looked lost, like someone who'd just realized that burning bridges left you stranded on an island of your own making. Adam looked angry, probably because he'd sacrificed his reputation for a relationship that had lasted less than 2 weeks once it was out in the open. I felt something I hadn't expected: pity for both of them. They'd thrown away everything stable and secure in their lives for a fantasy that couldn't survive the light of day. Now they were both alone, facing uncertain futures with damaged reputations and limited options. I, on the other hand, was free. Free from a marriage that had been slowly unraveling for months. Free from the constant strain of living with someone who didn't respect me. And free to build whatever kind of life I chose without having to prioritize the needs of someone who had shown herself to be unreliable. As I drove home through the quiet January streets, I thought about the future. Maybe I'd travel more, see parts of the world I'd always been too busy to visit. Maybe I'd start dating again, though the idea seemed strange after 6 years of marriage. Or maybe I'd just enjoy the peace and quiet of a house that was truly mine, where no one would ever again push me aside to make room for someone else. The snow was falling again as I pulled into my driveway, covering the world in a clean white blanket that made everything look new and full of possibility. I parked in my garage, walked through my front door, and poured myself a glass of excellent whiskey. Then I sat in my study, surrounded by my books and my computers and my carefully organized life, and raised a toast to the empty room. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and meant every word. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the city, my ex-wife was learning to live with the consequences of her choices. But that was her story now, not mine. Mine was just beginning.